My conversation with two Daily Lobo journalists about UNM's violations of the Clery Act is coming up in a little over 15 minutes. But right now, let's get back to police shootings and focus in on the prosecutor's role. There's been an endless parade of alternative systems. What's remained the same is that the process is different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction around the state. They've all produced the same result: almost no prosecutions in police shooting cases. All of this obviously is sort of an effort to do away with the perceived conflict of interest that local DAs have in terms of trying to decide whether to charge a police officer in a shooting. Judge Walton, let's start with you. Is that a real or perceived conflict of interest? A DA being asked to make a charging decision regarding a department they rely on every day to make their cases in court. Is that a real conflict or just something we all think is a conflict?
Well, you think about who are their witnesses in their cases. It's the police department. And when you damage your credibility or relationship with that department, you damage your ability to work on cases going forward. So it's obviously a real conflict that exists. It's how you handle it. And there are ways to segregate portions of your agency out, have special DAs that handle certain things that don't regularly use those same officers. But they develop relationships. They're considered a team. I mean, New Mexico has the team concept. The prosecutor and the police officer are a team for purposes of criminal cases. So if you're on the same team, it's not just a perceived conflict, it's a conflict that actually exists and that they're mindful of.
Joshua, I want to ask a little bit about that sort of patchwork, that hodgepodge. You mentioned that a little bit in the previous segment regarding the investigative part. But when it comes to the review, the decision that gets made on whether a charge should go forward, it's done differently in almost every district around the state. What have you seen in your reporting in terms of the kinds of challenges that presents for the rest of the legal system?
Absolutely. There are 14 different district attorney's offices in this state. Virtually every single one of them has a different process to handle this, which makes comparing and contrasting, frankly, a nightmare when you're looking at a police shooting that happens in Albuquerque versus Las Cruces versus Santa Fe versus Chavez County. One district attorney's office, for example, that is over Sandoval County, they just do not review police shooting cases at all because they believe that would be a conflict of interest for their office. Others, like the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office, will hire special prosecutors who are not staffers per se to review these cases, but it's also a small pool of attorneys who handle those sorts of things, and they know the police officers, they know the District Attorney's Office in and out very well. So it's a complete checkerboard depending on where you go in the state, how this is handled.
Leon, lawmakers have tried to tackle this. There have been a lot of proposals to potentially consolidate a one-stop shop that would investigate and review the police shooting for possible prosecution, do that in the AG's office. That's a proposal we've seen a bunch of times. That hasn't gone anywhere. Kind of similar to a lot of the other measures that we've seen in Santa Fe directed at or related to the issue of police shootings. What has it been like in the Roundhouse over the course of the past several sessions in terms of trying to address this issue?
Yeah, so I think that clearly advocates, lawmakers for a very long time have been pushing for uniformity around this issue. You can really get into the politics of it all, but at the end of the day, what we just described is different processes all around the state, and streamlining that process, irrespective of where it's housed, having an independent agency investigating and making these decisions is going to help reinstill some of that trust in the community that we've all talked about that's been lost. And then again, further education on how the system works so community understands that, and the technical aspects of the law, and knowledge around the justifiable homicide statute, because all the community hears is a decision not to prosecute, and there's just a lack of understanding about the why. And when people know the why, you can start making some changes in the law.
I'm going to ask you in just a second to talk some about some of the successes when it comes to police violence legislatively in the last handful of years. I don't want us to spend a ton of time on the history of the way police shootings got reviewed, but there is a lot of history. I spent a lot of time writing about this. There have been a lot of different things that have been tried here. In terms of the framework, the system that we've got now, education sounds like a great idea where people would understand better. Do you feel like any of the systems, whether it's a hodgepodge or one in particular, has taken a step toward transparency and at least trying to educate the public a little bit on how these decisions get made?
Not specifically in the realm of investigating police shootings, but there were some strides that were made in terms of getting more uniform standards in our state around how police use force. We banned chokeholds, which is a big step, of course, after what we saw with George Floyd. We banned shooting at or in a moving motor vehicle as a mechanism law enforcement can use. And so there are strides being made in the realm of standardizing police use of force in our state, but we still have a long way to go, particularly around creating uniform requirements for de-escalation. It's one thing to have a policy, but where we see the gap is enforcement of those policies and meaningful measures in the law to hold police accountable who run afoul of those standards.
Let's take a hypothetical scenario, and Judge Walton, I'll ask you about this, in which a prosecutor, a special prosecutor, a team of prosecutors, whatever the mechanism happens to be, decides that it is time to go forward. I see a case that I think needs prosecuted. Regardless of who's doing the investigating and who's doing the prosecuting, there really seem to be two paths. One is to present the case to a grand jury. The other is to present the case in a preliminary hearing. Can you tell viewers what the difference between those two processes is?
Sure. A grand jury proceeding is where a group of citizens are selected and serve as grand jurors for a variety of reasons. Sometimes there's a special grand jury, but usually we have grand juries that sit for a period of time and they hear all of the cases that DA wants to prosecute. In that setting, it's secret. And so the citizens are making the decision, but the proceedings and their deliberations and what they're presented with remain secret. And the district attorney really runs the show. There's not a judge. The defendant has the right to appear before them and can bring an attorney, but the attorney can't really do anything during the proceeding. And there is no cross-examination of witness. So basically, they present their investigation, for example, and then the citizen grand jurors make a decision whether or not to prosecute. That was long favored because then you have regular folks in our communities making these decisions. And then in the recent years, there's been a real criticism about that, partially because of the lack of transparency and the belief that citizens just rely too much on the DAs and whatever the DA wants, they generally go along with. And that
The old
DA
ham sandwich thing, right?
Right. So then there's been this shift, and in Bernalillo County, it happened last 5-6 years, where almost everything goes to preliminary hearing. And in preliminary hearings, New Mexico has some pretty strict rules for preliminary hearings with respect to the level of proof and the type of evidence, and the rules of evidence apply. So the same kind of standards that would apply at trial apply for a prelim, which makes them more difficult. But the witnesses appear, and a judge makes the decision based on what's presented, whether there's probable cause, and to bind the person over on charges. Probable cause is a really low standard. People think it means probably, like more likely than not. It does not. It's a much lower standard than that. And it is there a reasonable probability to reasonably believe that the law has been violated? It doesn't mean, is there any other explanation here? It's just, is there a reasonable probability that this is criminal behavior and the case should be bound over? And in those instances, they're open proceedings. The witnesses come in, they're sworn in, both sides get to question them, and their testimony becomes part of the record of the case, and it can be used in all the subsequent proceedings. So the downside to that is if you're very early in a case, you're starting to get locked in, and somebody might be doing more investigating, and then that testimony can be manipulated. And so it makes it harder sometimes for prosecutors to do too much too soon, because it can follow the case, and that testimony that's given is something that can be used. And I think, you know, you have some of the best attorneys representing, and they're able to creatively use those proceedings to their advantage. So it's more transparent, it's more formal, you have a judge making the decision, but it happens so early in the process that sometimes it's dangerous.
Thank you for explaining that. We've tried that at this table before. It didn't go nearly that well. I want to go around the table for my last question today. So AG Torres has not said yet, and I'd like to circle back to the Azay shooting from Las Cruces. The Attorney General has not said yet whether he plans to go to a preliminary hearing or present the case to a grand jury. But either way, there are going to be a lot of eyes on this case. New Mexico has led the nation for police shootings for a lot of years. We've spent a bunch of time at the table talking about that already. Joshua, let's start with you. What are the stakes in terms of public perception around police violence for this case?
It's really difficult to overstate what a watershed moment this could be. My reporting in September pointed to 2 prosecutions in the last decade for police shootings across the state. We had more than 350 police shootings in that time, 200 of which at least were fatal. That's likely an undercount. This is a big issue in New Mexico. We talk often about the way that we, per capita, lead the nation in police shootings. But like you said earlier, up here in Albuquerque, only Los Angeles, New York, and Houston shot more people last year. Well, those are all cities that dwarf Albuquerque in size. And this is becoming a growing issue across the state. In Santa Fe and in Las Cruces and in Rio Rancho, we're seeing similar trends play out, just on a smaller level for now. So it's really difficult to overstate how far this could go, depending on the result of the trial, on how likely this sort of thing is to happen more in the future.
Leon, the last time we saw one of these cases inside a criminal courtroom was the James Boyd shooting. That case, of course, ended in a hung jury, which I think was unsatisfying for people who believe lots of different ways in this town. Statewide, what are the stakes? What happens after this case is finished?
You know, for the impact on communities of color, a lot of people grapple with the issue of, do we celebrate when an officer's charged? Is it this, we see the system working for other people, so this is a moment that we can see the system also work for us? But there's deeper conversations around restorative justice and a discord in celebrating the prosecution and potential jail time of anybody, because it upholds those systems. And we know that just one instance of a cop being prosecuted and going to jail isn't going to change the disparate impact of the carceral system on people of color. It's not going to change the disparate impact of policing on people of color. So I don't have a clean answer to that.
I don't think it's a clean question. Yeah. Judge Walton, I'll ask you, could this case potentially have ramifications or make change in the legal system more broadly, depending on how it turns out?
I doubt it. I don't see that there's anything particular about this case. I think it has that would change the legal system. But with respect to the approach of district attorney's offices or the AG's office and the willingness to bring cases, it'll be interesting to see what a jury does and what a jury decides. And I think the fact is, very rarely does a conviction bring kind of the closure, the satisfaction, or the resolution that we think. Even in just a murder case, it doesn't bring that person back, and it doesn't fix whatever was wrong. And we do a lot of discipline and reviews on an administrative side to try to fix problems and to change behavior and to send those messages to fellow police officers. But there's no transparency. That because of the nature of personnel actions, the public never hears about those and they never see them. So even though there's very few criminal prosecutions, there is a lot of administrative investigation, administrative actions that are taken by agencies and police officers who lose their jobs. And that's not something the public hears about very often. To really have the idea that police departments are taking things seriously, they are trying to make changes, and they are indeed making changes and reviewing each other. The Albuquerque Police Department has put a significant shift into how many people review these cases, what they have to do. They have a judge overseeing to make sure that they're doing things right, in addition to what the Department of Justice has done. So there are changes. I just don't know that the criminal approach is where the change is what's going to lead the change. I think it's more these other things that are in place that will really drive the change within police departments.
Speaking of things that are potentially unsatisfying, the secrecy around administrative discipline in police departments, we could spend a whole nother segment on that another time. Thank you to Joshua Bowling, Judge Walton, and Leon Howard for having at least a version of this conversation with me. We did spend a good chunk of time talking about solutions to the police shooting issue in our state. We just couldn't fit it in the broadcast. So head over to our YouTube page and check that out. Thanks again to everyone for being here.
Thank you.